Hello and good morning. Today we will continue to discuss chapter 2 titled as End of Bipolarity from your class 12 NCERT textbook Contemporary World Politics. In our previous part we have already covered what is the meaning of end of bipolarity and what was Soviet system and Berlin War. Today let us continue. That is Mikhail Gorbachev and the disintegration of USSR, and what are the factors or reason for the Soviet Union disintegrations, what are the consequences of disintegration of USSR, and the consequences of this disintegration. So let's begin. As we see from the slide, Mikhail Gorbachev, who had become General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union in 1985, sought to reform the Soviet system. Reform was necessary to keep USSR abreast of the information and technological revolution taking place in the West. However, Mikhail Gorbachev's decision to normalize relations with the West and democratize and reform the Soviet Union had some other effects that neither he nor anyone else intended or anticipated. The people in the East European countries, which were part of the Soviet bloc, started to protest against their own government and Soviet control. Unlike in the past, the Soviet Union under Mikhail Gorbachev did not intervene when the disturbances occurred and the communist regime collapsed one after the other. This development was accompanied by a rapidly escalating crisis within the USSR that hastened its disintegration. Mikhail initiated the policies of economic and political reform and democratization within the country. The reforms were opposed by leaders within the Communist Party. And a coup took place in 1991 that was encouraged by Communist Party hardliners. The people had tasted freedom by them and did not want the old-style rule of the Communist Party. So Boris Yeltsin emerged as a national hero in opposing this coup. The Russian Republic, Yeltsin won a popular election, began to shake off centralized control. Power began to shift from Soviet center to the Republic, especially in the more Europeanized part of the Soviet Union, which saw themselves as a sovereign state. The Central Asian Republic did not ask for independence and wanted to remain with the Soviet Federation. In December 1991, under the leadership of Boris Yeltsin, Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus, three major republics of the Soviet Union, was disbanded. The Communist Party of Soviet Union was banned, and capitalism and democracy were adopted as a base for post-Soviet republic. And now let us move on to the next slide. That is, we have seen the declarations on the disintegration of USSR and the formation of Commonwealth of Independent States (CIS) came as a surprise to the other republics, especially to the Central Asian one. The exclusion of this republic was an issue that was quietly solved by making them founding members of the Commonwealth of Independent States (CIS). Russia was now accepted as a successor state of the Soviet Union. It inherited the Soviet seat in the United Security Council. Russia accepted all the international treaties and commitments of the Soviet Union. It took over as the only nuclear state of the post-Soviet space and carried out some nuclear disarmament measures with the US. The old Soviet Union was thus dead and buried. So that is the Mikhail Gorbachev and the starting of the beginning of the disintegration of the Soviet Union, USSR. And now let us uh, move on to the, let us proceed to the next. Why did the Soviet Union disintegrate? Why? What is the reasons? What are the reason or the factor for the Soviet Union disintegration? Let's see. Number one is, there are several reasons which lead to the collapse of the Soviet Union. This will, number one is, internal weaknesses of Soviet political and economic institutions fail to meet the aspirations and wishes of the people. And number two, second, the economy of the Soviet Union became stagnant. The Soviet economy used much of its resources in maintaining a nuclear and military arsenal. And number three, the Soviet Union also became stagnant due to rampant corruptions, the unwillingness to allow more openness in the government, and the centralization of authority in a vast land. Then, number four, a section of the society was not happy with the reforms of Mikhail Gorbachev reformation policy. It was believed that the reform introduced by Mikhail will at a very slow pace. The final reason is, another reason for the collapse of USSR was the rise of nationalism and the desire for sovereignty within the various republic, including Russia and the Baltic Republic. So that is the reasons why did the Soviet Union disintegrate. That are the factors or the reasons. And next, let us come to the last, that is, what are the consequences of disintegration? There are many consequences of the disintegration of USSR. Number one is, it led to the end of the Cold War confrontations. That is one of the consequences. There was no dispute of socialist ideology and capitalist ideology. Number two, power relation in world politics changed, and thus it led to change in the relative influence of ideas and institutions. Number three, the US became the sole superpower, which also backed the capitalist economy, making it the dominant economic system internationally. Fourth, the end of the Soviet bloc paved way for the emergence of many new countries. All these countries had their own independent aspirations and choices. Last but not the least, the international system saw many new players emerge, each with its own identity, interests, and economic and political difficulties. So that is the consequences. The consequences of the disintegration or the collapse of the disintegration of the collapse of the Soviet Union. So that is the conclude. That is the conclude of our discussion for today. In our next discussion, we will discuss shock therapy in post-communist regime and what are the consequences of shock therapy.